Do you really like melee weapons and also want to deal millions of damage with very little setup? Then the absolute unit called Kullervo is a Warframe for you. I'm Tipsy and today we'll be covering how to get the Warframe Kullervo and who has quickly become one of my most used frames, so let's just get right into it. So Kullervo is a melee focused frame that opens up a path to dealing very high melee damage, especially if you like using heavy attacks. Since his passives make them way more efficient, his abilities also give you a huge boost to crit chance with his first ability called Wrathfall's Advance. On top of that, his third ability, Collective Curse, will also link enemies together and they will then share incoming damage, letting you hit multiple targets at once with your melee weapons. His second ability, called Recompense, also gives you a strong survivability mechanic by granting you Overguard shields. But it doesn't stop there, they even decided to give this Warframe a teleport, so we have that as well, as Wrathful Advance can either be used to teleport straight into enemies' backs or just to teleport around the map quickly, so that is a huge plus with this frame. So in short, you will be a murdering melee machine dealing millions of damage and teleporting around the battlefield and shielding yourself with the blood of your enemies basically. And that's basically Kullervo in a nutshell, so look forward to this frame. Before we start, we have to make sure that we have completed at least 2 quests so we can actually get access to what we need for farming Kullervo. First, we need to have finished the quest called the Duvari Paradox quest, since this is where you will actually be farming the currency that we can use to buy Kullervo later on. Then the second thing you will have to have completed is called the Angel of Saruman quest, which actually unlocks the vendor who actually sells the Kullervo parts. So you will need to have completed at least both of these quests if you actually want to farm him and not just buy him with plat. So where do we actually get this frame, or rather where do we get the currency to actually get Kullervo? First, we need to make sure that we are in the correct spiral in the Duvari, as Kullervo is actually farmed in the Duvari Paradox or the Duvari section of Warframe. And in Duvari, at the top right of your screen up here, you will actually be able to see the current spiral you are in and what is coming up next. And to farm Kullervo, we need to be in either anger, sorrow and fear spiral, since those are the spirals that actually contains his content. That means doing any spiral that is not one of those 3 will not be able to spawn in Kullervo. So if one of those are not showing up, you will just have to wait until one of them actually shows up so you can actually go in and farm for Kullervo. And once we are in the right spiral, you will then be able to jump straight into the Duvari experience, not the lone story. That is because Kullervo's objective is usually a side objective, though it can appear as a main objective, but it is usually something you have to activate yourself. And when you're inside or have chosen your loadout, you'll just have to head to the area at the bottom of the map called the Kullervo's Hold. This is the area where you will find the Warden NPC who actually starts the Kullervo fight. Though I do recommend before you actually do the Kullervo farm to have gotten at least a few degrees to make the fight a little bit more easier. And then once you actually defeat Kullervo in this little arena, then you will just have to finish the Duvari run like normal by defeating the Orowyrm and then actually just extracting from the mission. And this will then reward you with something called the Kullervo's Bane, and this is the currency you will actually need to buy his part at the Acritist shop in the Dormi zone, where you will be able to buy all of Kullervo's part in this shop. And that is the short version for those of you who are a little bit more experienced. Now we'll go into a step-by-step guide to actually cover everything you need to know about doing this farm so you can farm Kullervo a little bit more in depth. Also, since making these videos do take quite a bit of time and effort, it would be greatly appreciated if you hit that like button, which will be somewhere around here. And if you want to see more content, you could also subscribe to be notified for the next videos. But now let's cover this step by step in case you are a more newer player or just want a more detailed guide on how everything actually works here. Personally, I would recommend doing this on solo since it is fairly easy with pretty much any setup, and at least if you're playing on normal, it should be pretty easy, though Steel Path will be another case. So this is up to you, but I do prefer to do this on solo so I can take my time, pause the game and also just play at my own pace. Next up, you have to make sure you're in the correct spiral, so anger, sorrow or fear, and it will have to show up in the corner, otherwise Kullervo objective will not show up in the mission. And once you're inside, pick your loadout you want to run with, and I also recommend grabbing your flowers over at the flower pot so you can get a little bit of resources for free every day. And if you got any Incentrics to spend, I would recommend heading over to the Incentrics upgrade station, and I would suggest actually working a little bit on combat and also endurance, since these buffs will actually make your drifter form stronger, and you will also be using your drifter in the Kullervo fight, which is coming up. Also in the combat tree you will unlock something that will allow you to spawn in your Warframe, making farming Kullervo a little bit easier if you're actually going for that. But I do recommend having it, as it is a nice quality of life to be able to spawn it in and kill him a little bit easier. So once you're inside Duvari, I personally prefer to do the objectives up to at least stage 5 before heading to the Kullervo arena. That way we can progress through the main stages so we can quickly end the mission afterwards. Plus there's even a chance that one of the main objectives will actually turn out to be the Kullervo's fight, since that actually sometimes happens. So just run Duvari as normal, completing your stages and the undergrowth missions until you're at least at stage 5. Along the way I usually choose the degrees that will actually boost my melee strength, since these buff also applies to the drifter's melee weapon and they can make your Kullervo fight a lot easier. But that is just my personal preference, you can choose whatever you want here. Then from here on, if you have the teleport unlocked, you can teleport straight to Kullervo's hold, or you can just fly all the way down there on your kite. And you just want to go all the way south to this island called Kullervo's hold, where you will be able to find an NPC called the Warden at the top of the arena who will actually start the Kullervo fight for you. Now in the Kullervo fight, you will be facing him across 3 different phases, and honestly I recommend just spamming your heavy attack here as he will die fairly easy. And as mentioned before, if you got your Duvarian Centrix with combat rank 3, you can then spawn in your Warframe to do a lot more extra damage, but don't worry, this fight is completely doable also without it. Kullervo in phase 1 will most likely just swing his heavy blade and either do an overhead slam or a backhand strike at you. And also if you are too far away from him, he might also teleport straight to you, making actually hitting him with your melee attacks a little bit easier in this phase. Now in phase 2, he will summon copies of himself that will actually throw exploding blades that will stagger you if they hit, but there's a slight delay before they actually explode, so personally I would just rush into Kullervo and bonk him with your melee as fast as possible to get those heavy attacks in and kill him quickly. And in phase 3, he will spawn something called the Persecutor Liminus, which actually if you kill all of them, a little cutscene will play where Kullervo will unleash a barrage of lasers, and again just go full monkey mode and bonk him with your heavy attacks if you have time to do that. Since we are on normal mode, the goal is really just to end the fight quickly, as the fight is not really that hard again on normal mode, but it will be made easier if you have the right decrease that will boost your survivability or damage a little bit. Otherwise get your Warframe to 3 and the fight should be fairly simple. But then once you actually defeat Kullervo, you can then continue the normal Duvari objective until you eventually spawn in the Orowyrm, and here you will be able to pick up a glaive weapon called the Obvious, and then you just summon your kite, then you'll just fly to the front of the big Orowyrm that will actually spawn in. As you can get thrown off the kite by the attacks of the Orowyrm, I would try to stay as high in the air as you can, then you can actually summon your kite again if you get hit, and then flying to the ground, then you can actually resummon the kite mid-air before you hit the ground, otherwise you will die. You can also use the glaive to actually destroy incoming projectiles before they attack you so you don't get hit off your horse. But the main goal here is basically to rush to the front area of the Orowyrm and aim for the small little side circles they have on the sides, and then you will actually be able to see a light blue light glow up when you're actually near it. That means you can then grapple to it and you'll just have to attack that spot and you will grapple onto the Orowyrm. If you grapple onto a spot that isn't high enough, just jump off and aim for the next grapple point further up the Orowyrm and just keep scaling your way all the way up to the Orowyrm's head. When you then actually reach the very front of the Orowyrm, you can then take control of it, and from here you will have to aim towards the 2 marked pillars and then actually destroy those as you normally would attack them, and then fly to the big pole that will spawn in the air and just fly into the Orowyrm fight. In the Orowyrm fight, it honestly doesn't matter much which weapons or frames you have chosen. You will get a pity weapon in here after a short amount of time, and this weapon can easily destroy the Orowyrm, and you can even complete this fight without using any abilities. So it really just comes down to knowing the phases and not standing in bad stuff here. And to damage the Orowyrm in these phases, you want to destroy the little small glowing rings around his body, and each time you destroy them, the fight will move on to the next phase. So in phase 1, you just want to destroy the rings while avoiding damage, which is fairly straightforward. And then in phase 2, you actually want to kill a certain amount of enemies to make the Orowyrm attackable again. Then the pity weapon will make this a lot easier, and you can just destroy the circles on the Orowyrm after you have killed the amount of enemies you need to kill. And lastly, in phase 3, you will have to kill small worms that will fly around the arena, and you'll just have to hit them, and once you have killed the amount you need to kill, you can then attack the circles on the Orowyrm again to actually destroy it. This will basically free the Orowyrm, and then once you have done that, it will fly away and a loot chest will spawn in the middle of the arena. And if you have completed the Kullervo's hold doing the run, you will actually get 4 to 6 Kullervo's Bane on normal mode and 6 to 8 on steel path. I do recommend just doing it on normal though. But these Kullervo Banes are basically what you will use to buy Kullervo's part at the Acritis vendor. So you will just head to your Dormi zone and then buy the parts you need for Kullervo. That is basically the full explained version of how to get Kullervo here. Now I know some people might run into a few issues, and one of those can be that the Warden NPC to actually start the Kullervo fight doesn't appear. Now if that does happen, make sure you actually are in one of the correct spirals: anger, sorrow or fear. If you're in the right spiral and the NPC still isn't there, try to fly away from Kullervo's hold and come back a little bit later, as sometimes the Warden NPC doesn't spawn in correctly and just needs to respawn. So fly to the other end of the map and come back to see if you actually have respawned the Warden NPC. But most of the bugs you could encounter in this should have been fixed by now, as there was a recent update that was actually addressing some issues with the Warden NPC specifically. And now of course the fastest way to actually get Kullervo is of course swiping your credit card. But I would not recommend doing this, but this is one of the frames that would take a little bit longer to farm than many of the other frames in the game. But to be fair, this farm is actually not too bad when you actually count in how many runs you will have to do. But overall, it should only take around 7 runs to actually fully buy your Kullervo, which isn't too bad. And in-game, this should translate to around 2 to 3 hours in-game if your runs are around 20 to 25 minutes. Meaning if you can do your runs quicker, you will be able to cut that down. And 2 to 3 hours to farm a complete frame is actually not too bad. To be fair, one of the worst things here will actually be farming the resources for him, which we'll go over now in a little quick section, as I will probably do a full Duvari resource video in the future, so we'll just quickly go over all of the resources you need for Kullervo to actually quickly cover them. And a little tip before we dive into the Duvari resources, you can actually go into Duvari on solo mode, then farm some resources, complete one objective, and then you will be able to get a degree. You will then be able to leave the mission, saving your progress and taking all of the resources that you have actually farmed with you. Meaning you can go in here solo just to gather resources without like doing the full run or anything like that. So one of the resources you need, you should already have, and that is from completing the Orowyrm. As each time you actually kill the Orowyrm for a normal one, you will get 10 Path of Clams, where on Steel Path you might get 15 instead. Also doing the Isle Weaver mission, if you have access to it, will also reward Path of Clams. But in the Orowyrm you need something called the Lamentus, which drops from Dax enemies found in Duvari. You can farm this by doing side objective of the spawn of Dax enemies you can find all over Duvari. They might also just patrol random areas, but basically any enemies you kill or the Dax will basically have a chance to drop the Lamentus. Then the Tasoma extract, which are these tooth looking resources, can be found in caves all over Duvari. They might be a little bit rare, but you will be able to find them basically in any of the holes all over Duvari. Then there is the second pearl, which are small deposits in certain Duvari camps which you can find, and they might also drop off certain enemies. You should actually have a lot of these overall, as those are actually one of the more common resources you will get a lot of over time. Lastly, for the Neuropics, you will need the Conla sprouts, which are usually found around water, and you can find these up north just exploring around all of these water holes here. And they should basically spawn all over these holes. For the chassis, we will need something called the Nakaros Pebble, which is basically a Duvari fishing resource. And you will have to head to any of these fishing spots as you see right here and just fish, and you will actually have a chance to get this resource. It shouldn't be too hard, and there's also another resource you get in this system which we'll cover later. Then the Kivnik is actually found throughout all of the northern areas. They should be fairly easy to find, as this is a common resource that will basically spawn all over the place. For the Rune Marrow, which is actually only obtained in the circuit or undergrowth mode by destroying the deposits found in there. So you'll have to do either circuit mode or just once you're actually in the undergrowth where you can use your Warframe. There's little small areas that will glow a little bit. If you destroy these, you will get Rune Marrow. Then there's the Orowyrm, which is found in the southern regions of Duvari, scattered all over the place. This is basically the same as the Kevnik, just in the southern region instead, where you will be able to find these all over the place basically. For the systems, we'll need something called the Agristone, which is basically also found all over the place. It's a little rocky deposit you can destroy. You'll also be able to find these deposits in like towns or areas with housing or structures, where they will be in like small crates instead. Then there is the Vani, which are also a common found resource all over, but you might actually have a higher chance of finding them in the Joy, Sorrow or Envy spiral, also on the island of Acri Harbor, which actually spawns in those cycles. Then you have the Aritate Scales, which are also obtained in fishing in Duvari, and as mentioned, here's the map, and you'll just have to go to any of the fishing spots to actually fish in. Also remember, you can only fish in the full experience and not in the lone story, as in the lone story you will not have side objectives, and fishing actually counts as a side objective. And with that, we should have covered all of the resources needed for Kullervo, so hopefully that should cover it. And that is it for the video. Hopefully you found some useful stuff for your Warframe Kullervo grind, which is a Warframe I highly recommend getting. Also let me know if you actually want the build for my ranged heavy Kullervo build, which is basically pretty simple and you won't actually need that much investment, but it is a fairly nice build that will do millions of damage fairly easy by just pressing basically 2 buttons. Also a big thanks to everyone who supports me on the Patreon, as you guys actually help me fund my daily chicken sausage roll. So much appreciated to Art Warrior here and all of the other names that could appear here. And click the link up in the corner to actually get a link over to the Patreon if you want to check that out. Otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and if you want more Warframe tips, don't forget to like and subscribe for future content, and be sure to check out my other videos for even more guides and tips. We also do have a Discord server, so hop in there and become a part of the community. Stay tuned, stay tipsy, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.